everybody. Welcome to the latest in our series of Hall of Fame positional tier lists. This is the Flash Focus crew. This is Deej with my brother Smokey. What's up, Smokey?
Hey, how you doing today?
I'm good. All right, today we're going to talk about Hall of Fame first baseman. We're going to run down in alphabetical order. And let's start off with Cap Anson. All right, so Cap Anson was a guy that played mostly in the 1800s, if not exclusively in the 1800s. 94 WAR. I believe he was the first 3,000 hit guy. Yeah, he's 3,400 hits. Mostly played for the Cubs. Bunch of batting titles. Now, the one ding against this guy is he was very vocally, in favor of the color barrier. He was really one of the guys. I think he was involved in, there were a couple of black guys that made the Hall of Fame in the 1800s, the Walker brothers, Welde, and his brother, I forget his name off the top of my head, and I believe he was very vocal in keeping them out. So certainly not a good person, but he's slam dunk Hall of Famer numbers wise. I don't know where do you see Cap Anson given all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he would be a surefire Hall of Famer, but I'd be fine giving him an A grade. Just, based on how the writers of today would feel about him, I'm not quite sure I'd put him as surefire based on that. I think the writers, they have feelings about players, and certain players they like and certain players they don't. I would put him at A.
Yeah, that feels about right. Certainly an F tier human being, but that feels about right. All right, next up is Jeff Bagwell. The Bagpipes. He was a terrific player, won the 94 MVP, Rookie of the Year, Gold Glover. He had a relatively short career, but he got 80 WAR in his 15 seasons. Had that great year in '94, the shortened career. Famously traded for Larry Anderson. This is one of those guys that what's his OPS plus 149? Yeah, amazing quality wise, but just kind of missing out on some of the career numbers. 2,300 hits, 450 dingers. I would say overall, given he's a first baseman, he feels like about an average Hall of Famer to me. He's feels pretty C tier. What do you think about Bagwell?
Yeah, I mean, he was part of the Killer Bees with the Astros. Yeah, longevity is always an issue. I'd give him a B or a C grade. I got to watch him live. He was a great baseball player while I was growing up, one of the best. Never dinged for steroids in the steroid era. B or C.
Yeah, C feels about right for him. Definitely a Hall of Famer, but not like there's nothing amazing about him. All right.
Agreed.
All right. Next up is Jake Beckley. 19th century guy, 2,900 hits, pretty impressive. He would have gotten 3,000 on a modern schedule. 87 homers in the dead ball era. No slugging titles or anything. What's his WAR? 61 WAR. I don't know. Just like nobody ever talks about this guy, so it's not like he's an all-time great, like Cap Anson or whatever. But he's got numbers. No black ink. He was a first baseman who didn't lead the league in literally nothing. Oh, there he led in triples one year. Yeah, I don't know. To me, this is like just a textbook D tier player. Like he's a guy you've never heard of, but he has Hall of Fame worthy numbers, but there's nothing good to say about him. Do you feel strongly about Jake Beckley?
Nope. I would agree with D tier.
Yeah. All right. Next up is Jim Bottomley. So, Sonny Jim, as they called him. He was a slick fielding first baseman. He had 36 WAR playing for the mostly the Cardinals. He did have a couple terrific seasons there. Got the MVP in '28 for the Cards. We all remember that. Good doubles hitter. Had a solid peak there, although he never really went over 6 WAR in any one season. 36 WAR. I believe Sonny Jim was one of the famous, Frankie Frisch crony Veterans Committee guys. He just basically Frankie Frisch himself a legit Hall of Famer. Got all his old buddies from the 20s and 30s on the Cards and Giants in who didn't belong. To me, bottomly he's an F tier. I think he got in via cronyism. He doesn't have the numbers. He doesn't belong. Are you I don't know? Are you willing to stand up for Sonny Jim, or do you consider him boot-worthy?
That's F tier.
Yeah.
I don't know a first baseman with a WAR in the 30s that belonged in a Hall of Fame. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, he got in via cronyism. He is Lyle Overbay of the 100 years ago. All right, next up is Dan Brothers. Brothers was a famous 19th century power hitter out of Sylvan Lake, New York. So he had 79 WAR, tons of black ink, just led those Buffalo Buffs in every rate stat there was. Couple home run titles. This is definitely one of the 1800s guys that I remember reading about as one of the greats. His name doesn't have much staying power, but to me, this is a very strong B tier Hall of Famer. He certainly has the numbers. I'd heard of him outside of my baseball geekery, but he's not an A or an S tier or anything. I don't know. Where do you think Dan Brothers stands?
A or B tier. I mean, the statistics speak for himself.
Sure, yeah.
He's not as famous as Cap Anson numbers wise. He didn't quite hit the 3,000 mark. I'd agree with A or B tier.
Yeah, that feels about right. He certainly was an excellent hitter among his peers, but I bet almost nobody watching this has heard of him unless they're as hardcore baseball geeks as we are. All right, after Dan Brothers is Orlando Cepeda. Cha-Cha, they called him. Out of Puerto Rico, he had 50 WAR. Not very much. He had that great season in '61 where he led in homers and RBIs, which was a big deal back then. Won the Rookie of the Year. Won an MVP later with the '67 Cards, that famous World Series team. He got in on the Veterans Committee, which to me, with a handful of exceptions, almost always means you max out as a C tier Hall of Famer. I don't hate that he's in the Hall of Fame, and I know he was one of the first great Puerto Rican players, and that's not nothing, but he just kind of lacked the offensive profile you want to see out of a Hall of Fame first baseman. I don't have a problem with him being in the Hall, but this guy's he feels like a D tier Hall of Famer. What do you think about Cepeda?
Yeah, I mean, a little higher. I really like people that they kind of the first Puerto Rican, the first African American, the first of anything. I think it's harder. I'd grade him a little higher as maybe a C or a B. I have a hard time stomaching D tier.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard to be the newest at doing something. There's a degree of difficulty to that. I want to pound the table for C tier for him.
All right, yeah, that's I can work with that. C tier Hall of Famer, taking intangibles into account. All right, after Orlando Cepeda is Frank Chance. So Frank Chance was mostly in because of a poem, the famous Tinker to Evers to Chance poem. Now, I will say Chance is definitely, among those three guys, the most deserving Hall of Famer. So he was certainly had a very long, very successful career as the Cubs' first baseman in the early 1900s. He stole a lot of bases. How many first basemen do you see still in 50, 60 bags, even back in the day?
Not many.
Yeah, only 20 homers, but again, dead ball era. 135 OPS plus, certainly excellent, but not amazing. 46 WAR. Yeah, it feels like a C tier to me. Just kind of like I have no problem with him being in, but he just wasn't great at anything unless you're really into first baseman who can swipe bags.
I think that's fair. C tier.
Yeah.
The name recognition.
Yeah,
Too.
everybody's heard of him. That's cool. Fun fact: the third baseman in that infield, Harry Steinfeld. All right. Now up after Frank Chance, got another old-timey guy, Roger Connor. So Connor, I believe he was the home run leader for a long time until Babe Ruth broke his record. So obviously, he never even led the league in homers. But this is a lot of home runs for the dead ball era. 138 homers. He was the 19th century Babe Ruth. They didn't have the MVP back then, but he had 3 WAR titles. Definitely one of the guys that you hear about as a very important power hitter of the 19th century. Got reasonably good black ink. 153 OPS plus, 84 WAR. I consider Roger Connor an A-tier Hall of Famer. I think he's definitely, up there with Cap Anson. Just one of the guys that really stood out back then. I don't know. What do you think about Roger Connor?
Yeah, that OPS plus sells me on him. I would go with A tier.
Yeah. All right. Next up is Jimmy Fox. So Jimmy Fox started out as a catcher, moved over to first base. He was mostly on the Philly A's and Red Sox. Tons of dingers. Hit 534 homers. Had 9 or 10 WAR a couple times. Tons of black ink there. What's his OPS plus? 163. That is amazing. So to me, Jimmy Fox, 93 WAR. Wow. He is I don't quite consider him S tier because I think he just doesn't quite have the star power. But he is about as high in A tier as I can come up with. I don't know. Do you feel like Jimmy Fox belongs in the A tier or S tier? Or what are you thinking, Smokey?
I think A tier is, he. I mean, if you wanted to pound the table for the S tier, I guess you could, but A tier sounds about right.
Yeah, for me, S tier is just kind of there's not even a debate. Like, of course he's an S tier. And I think there's some debate. He doesn't have the star power of some of the other guys we're going to get to, but he's about as good in A tier as it comes. All right, after Jimmy Fox, speaking of S tier, spoiler alert, Lou Gehrig. He just all-time great, inner ring guy. Just was arguably one of the best hitters ever. Just tons of black ink. Obviously, 114 WAR, and he died at had to retire basically at 35. Man, this is just fast track this guy right to the S tier. Any words on Lou Gehrig, Smokey?
Yeah, he's S tier. When you think of Major League Baseball, that's one of the all-time greats.
Yeah, there's so many great nicknames too. Just check those out. All right, so after Lou Gehrig, we got Hank Greenberg. So Hank Greenberg was 56 WAR, although he missed 3 key seasons in his early 30s to World War II, and he was getting 6 WAR there, so you can easily add 15 WAR to this and gets him up into the 70s. He had 4 home run crowns at as high as 58 one year. I believe he was the first Jewish star, which is pretty cool. I don't consider him quite as good as some of the other guys, but throw in his army service and he basically missed a 4th year in 41. He only played 19 games. So he missed 4 seasons right in the prime of his career. So you can mentally add 330 homers. You can add at least 100 to that, way more really. Got 2 MVPs despite all that, 2 rings for the Tigers. Another guy that played one final pointless season with another team and couldn't be a lifer. Hey, guys, stop doing that. Just be a lifer. Don't play for the Pirates in your final season. Be a Tiger. Just do it. Anyway, so Hank Greenberg. Hank feels like a B tier to me. What do you think about Hank?
Either A or B tier. I think it's hard to extrapolate what he would have done in those seasons he took off. But yeah, I wouldn't pound the table too hard for anything other than A and B.
Yeah, certainly an all-time great. All right, now after Hank Greenberg is Todd Hilton, very recent inductee. So Todd was obviously the longtime Rockies first baseman. Congrats on staying with the Rockies, Todd. I don't think no MVPs, 5 All-Stars, 3 Gold Gloves, 62 WAR. He had that one amazing season in 2000, but other than that, didn't really stand out offensively. Played in the steroid era. He only had 369 homers, 2,500 hits, so nothing amazing. Man, he didn't even come close to an MVP. Although that was a great season he had in 2000. Certainly was the offensive MVP. And, he gets dinged for playing in Colorado. But I don't hate him in the Hall of Fame, but I do consider him a below-average Hall of Famer. Feels like a D-tier Hall of Famer. What do you think about Helton?
He was really good he's a really good hitter. If you wanted to say D tier, I would probably try to bump him up to C just because, he was, in my opinion, one of the most natural hitters.
Well, one thing I want to point out about Helton, look at his home run total. So he was hitting 30, 35 dingers. Then all of a sudden in 2005, they start PED testing, and he's hitting 20, 17, 7, 8. He doesn't crack 20 in a season in the second half of his career. He had back injuries. They were also PED testing. Not saying he did anything. There's zero evidence that he did. But he spent half his career as a first baseman hitting 15 homers at Coors Field. And he didn't even crack.
All right. I will capitulate. Let's go D tier for him.
Yeah. All right. Helton. Then we got Gil Hodges, the Brooklyn Dodgers. And did he play for the LA Dodgers? Yes, briefly at the end. And then he came back to play for the Mets. All right. So Gil Hodges was the first baseman on a very famous, the 55 Boys of Summer Dodgers team. He also managed the Miracle Mets in '69, so I can kind of buy a narrative that he's very close as a hitter, and he had, the manager credentials to kind of bring him up over the hump. 44 WAR as a first baseman. He didn't lead the league in much of anything, just played every game and struck out the most one year. Has a couple sac fly crowns. 370 homers. He didn't even have 2,000 hits. Jeez. Was in the military during World War II, so maybe give him 2,000 hits mentally for missing those years. Again, I don't hate that he's in, but he's really cuspy. I don't know. He feels like a D tier Hall of Famer to me. What do you think about Hodges?
Yeah, that being the manager of the Miracle Mets is kind of a wonky addition. But the numbers speak for themselves. He's a D tier. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think maybe an E tier hitter, but then you throw in the Miracle Mets managing, and I can bump him up because even if you didn't have much of an impressively long managerial career, I think just kind of just being around for stuff like that means that you are worth, immortalizing in the Hall of Fame. All right, so after Hodges, we got George Kelly. George, also known as High Pockets. He was 6'4". His pockets were high. No one can say they weren't. All right, 26 WAR. High Pockets is another crony, Frankie Frisch, crony, phony, baloney, macaroni. Does not belong in the Hall of Fame. There's just nothing. Your buddy got you in. I don't know. Did you want to pound the table for high pockets, or should I just fast track him straight to the F tier?
Put him in the F tier.
Yeah.
Man, that dude does not belong in the hall.
Yeah. Frankie, just Frankie. Okay, Frankie. All right, so after that, we got Harmon Killebrew. Harmon Killebrew is a pure slugger, great guy. He's from Idaho. Not too many ball players from Idaho, the pride of Payette. So 60 WAR. He was a slugger. He was a Bubba. Hit 573 homers. 6 or 7 home run titles. Yeah, definitely, absolutely an extremely deserving Hall of Famer. Just kind of, great power hitter, but not much known for much of else. I feel like this all averages out to a C tier. What do you think of Killebrew?
What was his career WAR?
60 WAR.
Whoa. Yeah, I guess B tier. C tier is good.
All right, yeah, feels about right. All right, after Killebrew, we got Buck Leonard. Leonard was a Negro Leaguer. I do remember reading about Leonard a great deal as one of the all-time greats. Again, Negro League statistical coverage is poor. They probably have about a third of their games. So you can kind of mentally triple things. Again, just total rule of thumb. Don't consider that remotely mathematically accurate or anything. But you look at his stats, we got a 180 OPS plus, tons of bold ink here leading the league in everything that everybody cares about. 3 WAR titles for what that's worth. Tons of all-star games. So from what I know as a baseball geek, Buck Leonard was probably considered roughly an A-tier Hall of Famer. He's not one of the inner ring, Negro League guys like Oscar Charleston, Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, but I think he's the tier just below. Any words on Buck Leonard?
I think he's an A tier.
Yeah.
He's got the background for it, I think.
All right. So after Buck Leonard, we got Willie McCovey, nicknamed Stretch or Big Mac, the original Big Mac. He was 6'4", played first base for the Giants in the 60s and 70s. Ooh, he played in 4 decades. He played from 59 to 1980. That's kind of neat. So he had that MVP in 69, hit 500 homers, 2,200 hits. His OPS plus of 147. That's terrific. 65 WAR. Yeah, he feels like a straight up and down average C-tier Hall of Famer to me. Certainly excellent, very belonging. What do you think about Willie McCovey?
Yeah, I think C tier, that's about right. Yeah, got that MVP. Definitely deserving. Yeah, C tier is good.
Okie doke. Fred McGriff, the crime dog. So McGriff hit 493 homers, and he played in 2 strike seasons. So probably would have gotten 500 with normal, luck. Certainly a likable player. He was on that famous, baseball skills commercial, the Tom Emanski drills in the 90s with that trucker hat. Played for the several different teams, mostly the Blue Jays and Braves. And 5 years for the Devil Rays. Didn't realize he was there so long. He had a bunch of 30 homer seasons. What does he have? 1, 2, man, he hit 30 homers like 12 times. Never hit 40 though. Kind of interesting quirk there. Yeah, McGriff was one of those guys where you're like, he doesn't quite feel like a Hall of Famer. And then he got in, and you're like, that's fine. He's a likable guy. It was never an absolutely feared slugger, but just kind of was always out there hitting about 35 dingers, and you'd take him hitting cleanup for your team. He only had 53 WAR, 2,500 hits. To me, McGriff is a pretty clean D tier Hall of Famer to me. I think it's cool that he's in. He doesn't really bring the standards up or anything, but I definitely don't hate that he's in. He was certainly a likable guy and an excellent player. So I don't know. Are you going to stand for the crime dog, or what do you think?
I think a D tier is about right. Uh, you know, he played the game the right way for a long time, and he was kind of amongst people that did not. Yeah, I'm good with D tier.
Yeah, he was just very steady and not never had an even close to an MVP caliber season, but he just was also like never worse than good. So just kind of another boringly excellent career. All right, after Fred McGriff is Johnny Mize, the original Big Cat. So I mostly know Mize because he hit 50 homers one year. 71 WAR. Wow, didn't realize he had so much. And he missed 3 years in World War II. So, geez, he had, 6 WAR before and after. So you could probably add 15, 20 to that, getting up in the mid to high 80s. I will say I did not realize Johnny Mize was this good. He had, 4 homer titles, tons of black ink, mostly before his military career. Although he had the big 50 homer season after. Man, he's really good. I'm slightly surprised at how much I didn't realize he was this good. 10-time All-Star. Yeah, numbers wise, he's pretty close to A tier, but I think the fact that he just doesn't have the star power might kind of drag him down to a B. I'm thinking B. What are you thinking about Johnny Mize?
Yeah, A or B tier. I wouldn't cringe it either. I'd be more comfortable with B tier. I always hear him in the same breath as like Jimmy Fox and McCovey and people like that. So yeah, I'm good with B tier.
All right, feels about right. All right, next we got Eddie Murray, Steady Eddie. He was basically very similar player to Fred McGriff, except he had, played a little longer and got over the hump. So very cool that he got 500 homers and 3,000 hits. Another guy that, check this out. Man, he never hit more than 33 homers, and he hit 500 just by being steady. He just went out there and hit 27 homers and hit 290 every year, and there you go, Hall of Fame. He just never missed time. 69 WAR. Man, just a great, consistently excellent, very good player. Eddie Murray he didn't really have a peak though. Did he win an MVP? No MVPs. He did win the Rookie of the Year. Sorry, I have it still sorted. Yeah, Eddie Murray, man, he feels like a very C tier to me. Just kind of a very solid, average Hall of Famer. Nothing bad to say about him whatsoever. But didn't really have the peak where you could rank him much higher. What do you think about Eddie Murray?
I want to pound the table for a B tier.
B.
The 3,000 hits, the 500 home runs, just steady. He got the numbers that are when you say oh, this is the Hall of Very Good, he's a notch above that.
Yeah, he had 500 homers and 3,000 hits. I know those are a little old-fashioned numbers, but that means something, and it means a lot. All right, 3,500. Yeah, that's fair. I can bump him up to B. I think that is a fair assessment. Okay. Now after Eddie Murray, we have Buck O'Neil, so another Negro Leaguer. So Buck O'Neil was not inducted as a player. He was inducted as a pioneer and executive. So O'Neil was he was a longtime Negro League player, but he just was not considered a good enough player to be inducted as a player. But he just dedicated his whole career to baseball. He was just if you watch Ken Burns' baseball, he's all over that. Just a great guy. He has so many stories. Lovable guy. The guy just loves baseball. You just watch an interview with him and you just want to go grab your mitt and play catch. So he's not. This isn't a playing career question. He's got 2 WAR. Again, Negro League coverage is spotty, but he just isn't a Hall of Famer. But he's in here as a pioneer and executive, and he was one of those guys that's just we got to get this guy in the Hall of Fame some way, somehow. and they finally did. All right, so he's not in as a player, but I don't know what to do with him. Like I love that he's in. Like again, just watch Ken Burns baseball if you haven't, and you will be the biggest Buck O'Neill stan in the universe. I don't know. I feel bad giving him a D. I don't know. I'll just put him in as a C. Why is his picture so small? Well, that does not reflect how we feel about you, Buck. I don't know. C tier. I think he belongs. I like that he's in, but there's no like statistical reason to put him in. But he's a pioneer and an executive, and we love him. I don't. Any words on Buck O'Neill?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I'd agree with the C tier. The playing ability is normally what we look at, but the executive is also something to look at. Yeah, let's go C tier.
All right. Next up is David Ortiz, Big Poppy, more of a DH, but Baseball Reference ignores DH when ranking Hall of Famers. So, 55 WAR, a little bit of a late bloomer. I think he didn't have his first big season until he was 27. Super famous. Everybody knows him. Your grandma can name him. Had that big 50 homer season. I believe no MVPs, but it's finished top 5 several times. Had one of the all-time great final seasons. Hit 38 dingers and led the majors in OPS and slugging. There's the famous meme about him, doing PEDs, and he was on the quote unquote leaked list, but, no evidence, no proof. 2,500 hits, 500 homers. He was a DH. I have no problem with him being in on his numbers, of course. 550 homers is 550, or 540 rather. It just feels like a very strong C tier Hall of Famer to me. What do you think about Big Poppy?
This is a hard one. You know, I in my heart believe that he did steroids, and that probably elongated his career. I don't know. I'm conflicted on Big Poppy. I like him. He's a likable person.
Sure.
C or D tier. I think his numbers were inflated, but I'd go with C if I had to, but I'm not terribly excited about it.
Yeah, I think I just have trouble having somebody with that many homers below average because, and he wasn't just a pure home run hitter or anything. He had like 380 on base. Yeah, definitely a Hall of Fame caliber hitter. All right, so up after Ortiz is Tony Perez. He was the first baseman for the Big Red Machine in the 70s, and later hung on with the Expos and Red Sox, Phillies briefly. Came back to the Reds at the end. But I believe he played with Pete Rose on the Phillies and the Expos, so that's kind of an interesting quirk. So 2,700 hits, 379 homers, 54 WAR. I believe he was also a Veterans Committee. They called him the Big Dog or Doggy. He was Cuban. I believe he might have been one of the first Cuban stars, so that's pretty cool. I don't know. No bold here. He just grounded to the most double plays one year. No MVPs. Only one top 5 finish. Yeah, I don't know. What's his career high in WAR? A couple 6 WAR seasons. He feels very solidly D tier to me. There's just nothing remarkable about him statistically, but I don't hate that he's in. Yeah, I don't know. This is a textbook D tier to me. What do you think about Tony Perez?
I agree. I'm not gonna fight on that.
Yeah. All right. Next up is George Sisler. So he was a slick fielding first baseman for the St. Louis Browns in the teens and 20s. He did at one point have the most hits in a season. Ichiro broke his record. Had 257 hits in 1920. We all remember that. Kind of a shorter career. Only 55 WAR. He hit 420 one year, 407. They hit 400 twice, which is pretty incredible. 340 career, only 125 career OPS plus. Yeah, man, those hits, 2,800 hits. Wow, that's actually quite good. Yeah, I know his WAR, only 57 WAR, isn't that impressive, but he was definitely considered an all-time great. You know, he was inducted in one of the first classes in '39. Got in there in one of the first 2 or 3 years. He's kind of like a feels pretty solidly B tier to me. What do you think about George Sisler?
Yeah, B or C tier. I mean, yeah, different era, I think, but the batting average, yeah, I'd pump him up to B.
Okay. Oh, he's from Akron.
Average.
He's from Akron. Oh, Boo Hiss went to Michigan. All right. After George Sisler, we have another Negro Leaguer named Mule Suttles. 80 tier name. All right. Mule, let's look at Mule's stats. He's a very good player early in his career. 37 WAR for a Negro Leaguer is very close to the top. Yeah, again, I can't say anything about old Mule. Great name. Lots of bold ink here on his page. I don't know. You want to give him a B tier? I don't have any frame of reference other than his numbers. What do you think about Mule? You like him as a B tier Hall of Famer?
Yeah, the numbers support it.
All right. Mule is a B. After Mule is Ben Taylor. Ben Taylor is another Negro League first baseman. He only had 19 WAR. He was inducted in 2006 in that big, rush where they inducted a bunch of guys. Looks like he had one incredible season. Didn't even start till he was 31. He's had an amazing season. They're probably MVP caliber, but no MVP. I don't know, a short career, peak. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not really in love with his numbers, and that's all I can see here. I've never heard of him outside of vaguely being aware he was a Hall of Famer. I don't know. What do you think? E tier, like there's some narrative, but not very impressive numbers. I don't know. Do you feel strongly about Ben Taylor one way or the other?
I don't know much about him, if I'm being honest. I know he's in the Hall, and that's it.
All right. Well, his numbers aren't very impressive. We don't have any E tiers, so there you go. All right. Next up is Bill Terry. So Bill Terry's claim to fame is he was the last National Leaguer to hit 400, which he did so in 1930. So Bill Terry is another borderline crony pick, although he's certainly better than the other guys. He did have 57 WAR. He did have a very good peak where he had 6-7 WAR several years in a row. I don't think he's really a crony pick. He deserves the Hall of Fame, but he's kind of on the lower end. Hitting 400 is pretty cool. He was a career 341 hitter. Not much of a power hitter, it looks like. He did play his whole career in the live ball era. He feels like a pretty solidly C tier Hall of Famer. What do you think about Bill Terry?
Yeah, I could go with that.
Okay.
Especially with that 400 season.
Yeah.
But the WAR is a little on the low end.
It is. How many hits did he have? 2,200. Yeah. All right, C tier feels about right. Bill Terry. Next up, Frank Thomas, the Big Hurt. He was just like the power hitter of the 90s. And, Frank the Tank. He was so big and he was vocally anti-PEDs and just great guy. Just consistently was just at the top of the heap and everything throughout the 90s. Won back-to-back MVPs in 93, 94, 500 dingers. He had 2,500 hits, but only because he walked so much. If you add those up, he's over 4,000 total. I kind of feel like the new 3,000 hits should be 4,000 times on base so that you can, take guys who walk a lot into account. But that's just me. 1, 2, the 4 on base titles. Yeah, this guy is about as clear an A tier Hall of Famer as can be. I don't think I'm quite ready to put him in his S tier, but he's a a strong A. What do you think about the Big Hurt?
He's A tier. He's definitely not quite S tier. I would reserve that for a step above, but definitely A tier.
Okay. Oh, I can enlarge his tiny picture. Of all players, Frank Thomas doesn't need a tiny picture. All right. Next up is our man, Jim Thome. Thome the homie. So Jim Thome, one of those Hall of Famers that kind of sneaks up on you. He never won an MVP. He was kind of overshadowed on the 90s Indians teams by, Kenny Lofton, Manny Ramirez, Albert Bell. He hit 612 homers. He had a 402 on base percentage. That kind of speaks for itself. 73 WAR. I think he was a little bit of a surprise that he got in on the first ballot. I think he maybe didn't quite feel like a slam dunk Hall of Famer throughout his career. But, 600 homers, 400 on base percentage, that's super elite. I don't know how many guys have both of those. Might not be more than 5. So Thome feels like a very solidly B tier Hall of Famer to me. What do you think about Jim Thome?
I agree. Yeah, he's B tier. He's a likable guy. I think that's part of why he was a first ballot. Everyone kind of liked him. He reminds people of a young Charlie Manuel.
Yeah.
Very likable.
Yeah, just a goofy hayseed that just country strong. Just grew up tossing bales of hay on the farm and just had translate that into 600 dingers. All right, next up. Oh, Joe Torre is inducted. Okay, well, Joe Torre is inducted as a manager, not as a player. But let's just take a peek at Joe Torre. He had a really good career. He was actually a catcher more so than a first baseman. Man, he was a good hitter. He did 58 WAR and hit 360 one year. I think he won the MVP. Yeah, MVP for the Cards. 2,300 hits, 250 dingers. Man, he was a really good hitter. He could almost, if you rate him as a catcher, he's like a middle of the pack Hall of Fame catcher. I'm kind of confused why you wouldn't.
Yeah.
Where do you rank as a Hall of Fame or how many games at catcher? So yeah, he caught more games than he played first base, and weird that he's rated as a first baseman. So again, we will not rank Joe Torre because he is not a Hall of Fame first baseman. He's a Hall of Fame manager. Just kind of wanted to point out what a great hitter he was. And do you think it would make any sense to induct him again as a player, or would that just be ridiculous?
I mean, as a catcher, probably like a D tier. That WAR is almost Hall of Fame level. If you really wanted to, you could. I mean, as a manager, he's probably an S tier. Probably like A or S. I mean, he's one of the best of all time. I mean, if you wanted to rank him, I'd give him an A overall.
Overall, yeah. Definitely just a lifelong. And then,
A tier.
yeah, and then he worked in the front office. He was like the discipline czar or whatever. Yeah, just like a baseball lifer, just the kind of guy. Just like one of the top baseball men.
Let's put Leonard in. Let's put let's put Torre in.
All right. Last but not least is Judd Wilson, another Negro League star. Had a very long career. Debuted at 29, but played till he was in his 50s, which is pretty cool. Certainly an excellent player early in his career. 33 WAR, that rule of thumb I kind of made up earlier, doubling or tripling their WAR, puts him well into, Hall of Fame category, their territory rather. I definitely know Judd Wilson to be considered one of the better Hall of Fame Negro Leaguers. He kind of feels like a B tier to me. What do you think about Judd Wilson? Any words?
Yeah, I'd be okay with B tier based on the numbers.
All right. Well, that wraps up our Hall of Fame first baseman tier list. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time. Check out the next position coming up. Take care now. Bye-bye then.